Hello, good evening, and welcome to the inaugural broadcast of Sex Addiction in the News on Facebook Live, Fridays at 5. I'm Stacy Sprout, licensed therapist, certified sex addiction therapist, and author of the book Naked in Public, a memoir of recovery from sex addiction and other temporary insanities. Thank you for joining me this evening. And I welcome you to share comments and questions on the newsfeed or the comments box, which I'll be reading later. We're going to be taking this live technology out for a test drive here tonight, and I can't promise you it or I will be glitch-free, but I'm very excited about the content, and I hope it will be interesting for you as well. I created this broadcast, Sex Addiction in the News, because I'm passionate about destigmatizing the conversation about sex addiction, so those afflicted can get help now. But I'm not the only one talking about it. Let's take a look together at what the world is saying about sex addiction. Our headline story this evening involves a new memoir about sex addiction receiving national and global press. The book is called Getting Off: One Woman's Journey Through Sex and Porn Addiction. On January 11th, 2018, newly published author Erica Garza was a guest on the Today Show with Megyn Kelly to talk about her journey through sex addiction and why she published a memoir about her story. Let's take a look at clips from her appearance.
The next few segments will include a little graphic PG-13 kind of material. Because you see, my next guest was just 12 years old when she says her addiction to pornography began, an obsession that turned into sex addiction. Erica Garza has written about her struggle to keep her addictions in check in her new, revealing, very raw book called Getting Off. Again, if you have young children in the room, we're going to be discussing topics that may not be appropriate. I want to welcome her because this is a difficult story for her to tell, and it took a lot of courage to tell it. This is how her story began.
The more I watched porn, the more it preoccupied my mind. So it became a huge obsession for me. So I couldn't really interact with other people without thinking of, could this lead to sex? Very lucky to have a stable, loving, supported childhood. There was no big trauma. When I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with scoliosis, and so I had to wear a back brace for 2 years. And that was the beginning of really starting to feel insecure and different from people around me. And I mean, the purpose of writing the book was not just to extend compassion to myself and understand myself better, but really to help other people who are going through this and feeling so alone and so afraid. But it's okay that there's somebody out there who understands.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Rob.
I just can't tell you how much of a need there is for women to have a place to talk about this. I've been treating men and women for almost 30 years with sexual and intimacy disorders. And men, you know, they have a problem, they talk about it, but it's so much harder for a woman to come forward with a sexual problem. We all know what names we give women when they act out sexually. Men are studs and players, you know, women not so nice.
We guilt and we shame women for being sexual beings at all, never mind in the way that Erica owns.
And I really admire you, Erica, because you're not, with a lot of folks I see, they become very rigid. You know, like, I'm going to cut sex out, or I'm going to cut, it has to be this. And you're saying, no, I want to be a fluid, open human being, but I don't want to do things that hurt me or hurt the people I love or don't allow me to grow my life. So I think you're on the right path.
Thank you both so much. All the best. And Erica's book, again, it's called Getting Off, is out now. We'll be right back.
Way to go, Erica. And if you didn't know, the man at Erica's side was Rob Weiss, licensed social worker and certified sex addiction specialist, who is a digital age intimacy and relationship expert, specializes in infidelity and addictions, most notably sex, porn, and love addiction. Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Rob, for getting the word out in a major way. I will include a link to this story and all these stories on tonight's newscast on my Facebook author page a little bit after the show. Next up is Opinion of a Sex Addiction Specialist, a story from the UK's Independent News titled Framing the Clinton-Lewinsky Affair Through the Lens of Consent Misses the Point of Workplace Sexual Harassment. The story was written by Gavin Sharpe, a therapist and certified sex addiction therapist candidate. Sharpe says, "As a therapist, I work with many women and some men who have experienced sexual harassment, often in the workplace. As with Clinton and Lewinsky, there has often been an abuse of power." Sharpe writes of the recent interview that Monica Lewinsky gave to Vanity Fair, in which she identified with the Me Too movement. He ponders the backlash to that which followed, where Lewinsky was criticized for saying she felt traumatized by what happened with former President Bill Clinton, as if she had no right to feel traumatized because her actions, as a 22-year-old intern, had been overtly consensual. Sharpe says, "My fear is that we are collectively traumatized by the mirror which is staring back at us. Perhaps each Me Too story brings the painful self-image into sharper focus until we can no longer bear to look. Perhaps men are reluctantly seeing a reflection of themselves as guilty or capable of being guilty of sexual harassment. Perhaps women are feeling uncomfortable and disempowered as they come to terms with the possibility that they have been victims of sexual harassment. I hope we are not overwhelmed with or fatigued by the Me Too movement and the gift and opportunity, as well as tragedy, that is emerging from it. The story here is not so much Monica Lewinsky and an affair that took place 20 years ago with the sitting President of the United States, salacious though it may be. The real story is our reaction to it." Thank you, Gavin Sharpe, for this in-depth consideration of a complicated topic. As always, my hope is that everyone who suffers from sexual misconduct can get help for the painful symptoms that results. In Partners and Families news, in 2017, a 27-year-old Mumbai woman approached the Supreme Court in India, saying her husband was suffering from acute porn addiction, and as a result, their marriage was devastated. This woman moved the court through her attorney, seeking to become party to a plea filed by her lawyer in 2013 to ban online pornography. A year later, the anti-porn activist opened up to midday.com about the story of suffering behind her efforts. A social worker by profession, the woman said that she once thought restrictions on pornography would be an invasion of privacy and of personal liberty, but because of her experience, she now believes addiction to pornography is destroying the matrimonial life of people in her country. The Supreme Court of India had already been considering a ban on child pornography, but several parties are seeking to expand the ban to include all pornography. And a quote, "By now," she said, "I realize that the reason my husband is addicted to porn is because of its easy availability. It doesn't matter how many hours a person is watching porn. You don't oppose alcohol addiction until the drunk starts getting violent. Porn has ruined my life. Sadly, we have normalized watching it. Since I haven't filed a case against my husband, I have moved to the Supreme Court seeking a change in the way we treat porn. It's a social malaise." To read more about her story, click the link in the midday.com article that I'll be posting, or you can look up Confessions of a Pornography Addict's Wife on midday.com. Our LGBTQ and sex addiction story this week is to introduce the book Lesbian Love Addiction, Understanding the Urge to Merge and How to Heal When Things Go Wrong. This pioneer book, written by Lauren D. Costeen, was published in November of 2015. Of the book, Lauren, a psychologist in Los Angeles, California, says, "This book offers insight for lesbians, bisexual women in relationships with women, queer women, and more specifically, any woman who loves women, as well as their family and friends and healthcare professionals, into the psychology of lesbian love addiction. It will give those who struggle with and suffer from love addiction ways to understand, cope, and heal from this debilitating addiction. It will give those who work with this population new tools to use to do this more effectively. Mostly, it will help lesbians understand their relationship failures and how to heal from problems associated with them, so they may grow and cultivate happier, more fulfilling connections in the future. Hopefully, more women who love women will find the help if they struggle with sex and love addiction, and this book can be a key part of that, as well as to help helping professionals who work with the population. In sex addiction and mental health news, the World Health Organization will bring out its 11th revised International Classification of Diseases coding manual later in this year, informally called the ICD-11. This manual is used by healthcare professionals worldwide to identify all kinds of diseases. The American correlate, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, or DSM, chose not to include a sexual addiction-related diagnosis in their 2015 version, though most experts in sex addiction believe it should have been included in some form. The DSM is falling out of favor even in the U.S., however. As licensed American mental health professionals, we have been required for insurance purposes since October of 2015 to use the World Health Organization's ICD for coding, not the DSM-5. Still under development, the newest 11th version of the ICD is poised to introduce several new categories of disorder, including compulsive sexual behavior disorder, or CSBD. A letter in the esteemed journal World Psychology by key neuroscientists involved in the development of the new manual described how it has arrived at this diagnosis and what it includes. There's a great article on this in Quora from Gary Wilson of Your Brain on Porn that goes into more depth, called Porn Addicts Will Soon Be Diagnosable Using the WHO's Diagnostic Manual, ICD-11. Check it out. This pending new diagnosis of compulsive sexual behavior disorder would bring a transformation in global sexual health because it would help raise public awareness about the problem. It would highlight the need and best practices for care of compulsive sexual behavior disorder, another way of saying sexual addiction, and help those entrusted to treat it, like health and mental health providers, to further embrace best practices to help those in need. The release of this diagnosis would also facilitate research to help us all better understand the problem and, critical to our next generation, further our efforts toward prevention. The ICD-11 is due out later in 2018, and I will certainly be following this story in Sex Addiction in the News. Our next story is from the Jamaica Gleaner, published on February 24, 2018, as the highlight of this week's Sex Addiction and Religion feature. It is titled Jamaican Christian Conference Aims to Empower Youth. Youth advocate Shanissa Grant felt called to help young Christians who were struggling with their faith. After a spontaneous talk with young people, she realized they had many unanswered questions on relationships and sex. "We need to put on a conference so we can get real with these young people," Grant said. The first conference took place in January 2018 and has repeated with great feedback. According to Grant, quote, "The objectives we are aiming to meet include helping young people be honest about their struggles, firstly to themselves. We also aim to open discussions about sexual struggles, depression and suicide, self-wounding, and porn addiction and masturbation." The final conference is scheduled to take place in Montego Bay, Jamaica on March 31st. I hope it is a great success and that we can see more heartfelt communications with youth about these vital topics, both inside and outside of religious communities. In Research in Sex Addiction, a paper published in 2017 surveyed 339 college students in the United States about their sexual behaviors online. Titled Cybersex Addiction Among College Students, a Prevalence Study, researchers Amanda Giordano and Craig Cashwell found that 19% of male college students are clinically addicted to online sexual activity, that is, use of pornography, sex chat, etc. They meet the clinical criteria of sexual addiction. That's about 2 in 10 male college students clinically addicted to online sex. Females use cybersex less than men, with the overall average when including both women and men as 10.3%. That is a lot of college students struggling with compulsive sexual behavior online. So reaching college students for identification and treatment of sex addiction is an area we need to improve. If you are concerned you might have a problem with compulsive cybersex or another area of your sex life, you can take a 10-question quiz on my website at stacysprout.com. Resources are listed there where you can get help right away. Each week, I'll be featuring a sex addiction book of the week, which this week is The Aftermath of Betrayal by Michelle D. Mays, certified sex addiction therapist and supervisor. This small but powerful book, which is called, I already said the title. This small but powerful book examines the painful betrayal trauma that those who love an untreated sex addict can experience to help sufferers put words to what they are going through so they can better understand and heal. Author and psychotherapist Michelle Mays, who vulnerably includes some of her own story of betrayal and betrayal trauma in the book, includes compelling chapters like reality fragmentation, the protective fog of shock, circuit overload, connecting the dots, and others. Though the book does not get to stories of successful individual or couples healing from sex addiction betrayal, it is a great resource for partners newly entering recovery, therapists or care providers who treat sex addiction, and sex addicts themselves or other family members who want to build empathy about the natural emotional impact of betrayal. The book is available online now, ebook for $4.99 or print for $5.99. Sex Addiction in the News is seeking stories. If you find a published news story that features sex addiction, feel free to send your link to me, Stacy Sprout, via my Facebook Messenger, or to my email is nakedinpublicnews@gmail.com. If you want, write your own story, get it published, and let me know about it, and if I can, I'll help promote it. We need to get more fair and accurate news stories out about sex addiction recovery and healing. This concludes tonight's episode on Sex Addiction in the News with Stacy Sprout on Facebook Live, Fridays at 5. Thank you for joining me. And click in next week for more of what the world is saying about sex addiction. I'd really like to hear your feedback on the show, so please send me any comments you have so I can improve it. And you can either post them on the feed or to nakedinpublicnews@gmail.com. To get notices of future shows, click like and follow my Facebook page. Together we can create a unique news source to help all of us stay current with the fascinating world of sex addiction recovery and the changes happening so quickly in our times. I'll be posting these episodes on my YouTube channel, Stacy Sprout, and feel free to share. In parting, my wish for you is this: may you feel loved, may you feel cherished, and may you love and cherish others. Good night and have a wonderful weekend.